All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Albertson. I am the Deputy Director here at the Center for Global Security Research at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Thank you, as always, for taking time out of your morning to join us or take the time to watch this video if you're watching it later on. Today's CGSR lecture is actually with the CGSR Director, Dr. Brad Roberts, who will be presenting the recent CGSR occasional paper titled Counterforce in Contemporary U.S. Nuclear Strategy. And just for those of you who are aware, it's posted on the CGSR website, so you can go take a look at it. You can peruse it while we're doing this talk. If you happen to be on site, you can come over to CGSR Spaces and grab yourself a hard copy. This is what it looks like. They're out in the lobby of the building where the CGSR Spaces are. The speaker today is going to key up the topic, so I'm not going to take a lot of time to introduce it. But he will talk a little about sort of what this term counterforce means for those of you who might be unfamiliar with it in the lexicon. What has the national security debate on this topic been about? What is it about now? And why this debate has implications for the U.S. nuclear deterrent, and also sort of what we do here at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So let me say a little bit about the speaker. Dr. Roberts has served as director of the Center for Global Security Research here at LLNL since 2015. From 2009 to 2013, he was Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Missile Defense Policy. In this role, he served as the policy director for the Obama administration's Nuclear Posture Review and Ballistic Missile Defense Review and led their implementation. Prior to entering government service, he was a research fellow at the Institute for Defense Analyses and the Center for Strategic and National Studies. He was editor of the Washington Quarterly, and he was an adjunct professor at George Washington University. Between leaving OSD policy in 2013 and assuming his current job as director of CGSR, he was a consulting professor at Stanford University and was a William Perry Fellow at the Center for International Security and Cooperation. So ground rules for those of you who are new to CGSR lectures. The speaker is going to talk for about 30 to 45 minutes. He's going to present some slides. Please raise your hand electronically at any point in the conversation or submit questions to me electronically at any point in the conversation using the chat function over at WebEx. The sooner you get questions in, the sooner you get your hands up, the easier it is to then roll right into the Q&A session and get as many of you into the conversation as we can for what I'm sure is going to be a really good discussion. So, Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for being with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that gracious introduction. Thanks, everybody, for making the time this morning. Not a great way to start a week, but it's a Monday morning, so we'll take up a grim topic, counterforce. Katie, let's go ahead and bring the slides up. Mike's already shown you the new publication. Next slide, please. And it is available here in the lobby of Building 170 for pickup for anybody who'd like a hard copy. Next slide, please. So what's this all about? So there was in the Cold War a debate about counterforce strategy. And when the Cold War ended, the debate went away. The debate is coming back. And its resolution, one way or another, will have very significant implications for the fate of the intercontinental ballistic missile leg of the triad and the associated requirements to strike mobile targets and hard and deeply buried targets. And I'll explain why that's so in a minute. But what I want to do is talk about what is counterforce, what was the old debate, what is the role of these capabilities, and how do we assess their value in the current strategic environment. Next slide, please. So I've turned to Merriam-Webster's dictionary for two basic definitions because, frankly, there's no single authoritative military source, and there are multiple formulations of these definitions sprinkled across the community of interest inside and outside government, inside the military and outside the military. There are different ways to think about counterforce and countervalue, but these are the most standard and basic definitions. Counterforce being an activity focused on reducing the fighting capability of the opponent's forces. Next slide, please. What is the place of counterforce in strategy? Why have we thought it important to be able to attack an enemy's nuclear forces? This goes back to the evolution in U.S. nuclear deterrence strategy in the 1970s. Prior to that time, our nuclear strategy was massive retaliation. We believed that if ever we were struck by the Soviet Union, we would need to be able to respond to a bolt out of the blue attack, quote unquote, a major large-scale surprise attack on U.S. forces when they were not operating on alert. We would need to respond massively, and this came to be known as mutual assured destruction, or MAD. The evolution in the 1970s was a step away that said that may not offer us much deterrence leverage because it may not be credible in the eyes of our adversaries. More credible in the judgment of people in the 1970s was that we would be able to credibly threaten to attack and destroy the particular things valued by particular leaders. The premise here was that leaders may value different things. They may value them at different times. Some leaders, probably of our adversaries, don't much value the populations that could easily be held at risk with nuclear weapons, but may very much, for example, value the control they're able to exercise over their state and society through the institutions of state security. So the idea here was to, in the 1970s and subsequently, was to have a deterrence strategy aimed at affecting the deterrence calculus of an adversary. This is the adversary's assessment of the potential benefits and costs and risks of different courses of action, including, importantly, the course of inaction. We want adversaries who are seriously contemplating aggression against a U.S. interest to assess that they're better off not acting than acting, even if they're not great off by not acting. Now, this is, of course, challenging. And to put at risk what enemy leaders value is one of the principal functions of our counterforce capabilities. Related to this is the ability to limit damage to ourselves. If we're trying to reduce the adversary's expected benefit of attacking us, we'd like to be able to reduce that perceived benefit by limiting the damage the adversary can do to us, or very importantly, to an ally or allies. And thus, there have been these twin effects of counterforce on the deterrence calculus, affecting the perception of costs and risks and affecting the perception of potential benefits. Next slide, please. So this slide just repeats these points in written form. Two primary roles of counterforce in U.S. nuclear strategy from the 1970s until today. Point number 2 there is about extreme worst cases, but there would be an ability to save many millions of lives, including the lives of allies. And to enable these roles, the U.S. needs nuclear forces capable of, well, surviving the enemy's first strike, successfully destroying the enemy's nuclear forces, including mobile ones, and crippling its command and control capabilities, including those that are deeply buried. We've had a recent illustration of that. Next slide, please. So I said that what we're witnessing today is the revival of an old debate in a new context. Well, what was the old debate? Four main arguments made by critics of counterforce. First, that it increases the risk of war. Someone will feel the pressure to go first. Our enemies will feel the pressure to go first if we have a credible ability to preemptively eliminate their capabilities, goes the argument. And this then increases instability in crisis and the risk that they will cross the nuclear threshold in order to act before we deprive them of the ability to act. The second argument is that counterforce increases the risk of a dangerous arms race. I'll come back to that one. Third argument, well, you've read it, counterforce cannot meaningfully limit the damage done by nuclear war. Damage limitation, argue two authors, is a costly fiction. And lastly, we don't need to rely on counterforce, nuclear counterforce, because we have a viable deterrent as it is, consisting of our sophisticated, advanced conventional capabilities. And we could compose a minimum nuclear deterrent capable of retaliation if there's a major attack on the American homeland. And we could, in the words of William Perry, retire the ICBM force because they are not necessary anymore. So 4 arguments advanced over decades. Next slide, please. But also over decades, no policy change. Counterforces remained a part of U.S. nuclear strategy, and counterforce capabilities have been considered to be a major factor to be sustained in the U.S. nuclear posture in the triad. So some of you will be familiar with the Strategic Posture Commission that just issued a report in October of 2023. Well, it looked at these questions and said, keep the triad, keep counterforce. Its predecessor commission in 2008 and 9, different group of people, also bipartisan, same conclusion. Nuclear posture reviews conducted by Republicans and Democrats of various political stripes, all examined these questions, all came to the same conclusion. And since 2013, each new administration has reviewed presidential nuclear employment guidance, updated that guidance to the military, a top secret document, but then is obliged to provide to the Congress an unclassified summary. And each of these summaries by each new administration since 2013 has reiterated the commitment to counterforce. And of course, since 2010, as many people in the laboratory know, the U.S. has pursued modernization of all 3 legs of the triad and the theater nuclear force in the form of the B-61 and dual capable fighter bomber. So looking back historically, some big questions raised about the strategy, no change to policy. Next slide, please. So why are we having this discussion again if there's been so little traction for the critics on this topic? Well, these 4 reasons, and let me touch on each. Next slide, please. The first reason is China's strategic breakout. For those of you not familiar with this point, 4 years ago, the U.S. discovered that China was secretly dramatically expanding its nuclear force structure with the addition of 3 nuclear missile silo fields and a part of China where the Chinese strategic rocket force had not previously operated. And they are building they already have more land-based launchers for intercontinental range ballistic missiles than does the United States. And this means that the number of ICBMs capable of reaching the U.S. homeland from adversarial states has roughly doubled during the period that New START has been in force while we have reduced the number of ICBMs that would be our counter to this capability. New START is the existing arms control treaty with Russia, due to expire next year after 15 years, entered into force in 2011. And so sometime soon, the US will have to either change its nuclear posture or its strategy. We, in fact, here at CGSR help stimulate this debate. If you are interested in this topic, you can find at our website or in the lobby in hard copy the report of a study group of 2.5 years ago on this topic, what to do about China's emergence as a second nuclear peer. And we examined this question and said our strategy is sound, our strategy of holding at risk things enemy leaders value, and we believe that includes that they value their ICBMs and other nuclear weapons. So we concluded the strategy was sound, and therefore the force structure needed to change to be increased to deal with this new problem. Well, that generated some stiff responses who argued that this is a recipe for an arms race, that if we counter China's developments, then Russia will have to build up to maintain parity with the United States. China will have to build up to. We will then need to build up, and we'll be locked in a three-way spiral. And this is a compelling vision and a possibility, but as you'll see, I think it's overstated. And so these critics argue that the best way to preserve strategic stability in this new situation is to change our strategy by dropping the counterforce component. And we won't have to race with China. We won't have to race with Russia. They can have whatever they need. Minimum deterrence would be fine for us. Next slide, please. Secondly, of course, there's rising concern about U.S. extended nuclear deterrence. This is so for at least two reasons. One is that our allies in Northeast Asia and Central and Northern Europe are newly vulnerable to nuclear coercion and possible nuclear attack by the nuclear capabilities of their regional allies. And they perceive that we too are newly vulnerable and thus might stay home. When their survival is at risk, when their sovereignty is in question, but our commitment to them proves not ironclad. And we stand by while some pain is delivered onto them militarily. So allies are anxious. Mike referenced my time in government service. When I was in government service in the first Obama term, we had 4 allies that I generally considered anxious on this question. Now I'd say the number is more like 25. And for the critics of Counterforce, this just is an afterthought. Extended deterrence requirements can be met by the rest of our deterrence posture. This is kind of a no-brainer. One of the classic books on this way of looking at the nuclear problem was written by William Perry and a co-author whose name I'm dropping at the moment, Tom Kalina, called The Button. The book came out in 2020. It mentions neither China nor extended deterrence. But China and extended deterrence are both at the center of our nuclear strategy in the current security environment. So this rising concern, the point here is that this rising concern about extended nuclear deterrence has driven a renewed discussion of, well, do we really need counterforce capabilities to deal with this problem? Next slide, please. Two more factors driving a renewal of debate about this topic. One is the dramatic cost growth for the replacement intercontinental ballistic missile called Sentinel, well known to the lab. Critics are asking, and I shouldn't just say critics, It's an ongoing high-level discussion in both the Pentagon and the Congress. This is going to cost us a lot of money. Is it really worth it? What's it buying us? What's the strategic advantage we get from these capabilities? And is it worth the price and the opportunity cost that comes with it? And finally, the missile defense project of the administration. It invokes a major question about how much offense you need if you're going for defense dominance. And counterforce critics have generally seen U.S. ballistic missile defense as a viable means to limit nuclear damage and thus to reduce or eliminate a role for nuclear counterforce. So these four factors have put this topic back into national discussion. And if the counterforce critics prevail in the new debate, the result will be probably the cancellation of the ICBM modernization program. And if you're not worrying about tracking down the command and control capabilities or mobile systems, then a lot of the technical requirements for improved capabilities go away. Next slide, please. So into this debate, we have dropped this publication. Basically, what happened was we went back to the study group on China as a second nuclear peer and asked people if they were interested in joining this discussion. I thought we'd have 5 or 6 essays. Well, I think we have 17 here. A lot of people wanted to join this discussion. And on the right side of the sheet, you'll see that a lot of them were allies. And something very distinct about this volume is this has been traditionally a debate among Americans, and that we were able to find some allied voices to come into the discussion was really a value added, and I'm proud of that. But I wish we'd been successful in getting an Asian voice or two. But essentially, the volume begins with some essays aimed at setting the record straight. And here I might just reference Heather Williams' essay, who she observes that there's a lot of talking past each other in this debate because people use words without defining them, and very often the definitions they have in mind are not the same as the person they're talking to. So, for example, if we have a strategy to target what an enemy values, then a counter value strategy wouldn't just be population targeting. It might not be population targeting at all. It would be attacking the things enemy leaders values, including their nuclear forces. And so some people talk about counter value as encompassing also an attack on forces. Some people talk about counter force as an attack just on nuclear forces. Some talk about it as an attack on nuclear forces and their command and control systems. Some talk about it as an attack on nuclear forces, command and control, and general supporting military capability. So there's a lot of the debate is about confusion arising from different concepts. Then we have a set of essays on rethinking counterforce in the 21st century context. Our objective here was to lift the debate, which has traditionally occurred in a Cold War framework with Cold War points of reference, with Cold War literature, and bring it into the present as best we could. And so you have two former deputy directors of the Joint Staff for Strategic Stability. Writing here, you have 2 people from Stratcom and me writing about extended deterrence. So this is more than we bargained for, but I hope it's useful and interesting to all of you. It closes with a set of conclusions which fell off the bottom of the slide, but which provide summary arguments about the cases for and against counterforce, or more precisely, against counterforce and then for counterforce. This wasn't really a book aimed at making the case for counterforce. It was aimed at advancing the discourse on these questions. So it's got people who think in all sorts of different directions, but I think it's a useful compilation of work. Next slide, please. So let me come back to the concerns raised by the critics of the moment. And drawing on different aspects of the volume. I don't want to attribute these ideas to anybody other than myself, but you'll find some of these ideas reflected in multiple pieces in the volume. On China, is China's emergence a case where we need counterforce, or can afford to give it up or should give it up because it's too dangerous? Well, our basic judgment is that a three-way arms race can be avoided if Russia and China would make the choice for arms control. We are the party who's not racing at the moment. And if they choose to continue to seek nuclear advantage, then the alternative to a three-way arms race is that we, the United States, move into a position of quantitative and qualitative inferiority. That is not unsettling to some of the critics of counterforce. It is unsettling to our allies, and we have to wonder about what kind of message that sends to Beijing, to a leader in Beijing who believes the United States is in decline and retreat. On extended deterrence, the main theme of the 3 or 4 contributions by European authors is damage limitation is in the interest of your NATO allies as well. U.S. damage limitation is in the interest of U.S. allies as well. This is an argument made even by the French contribution. France generally eschewing any role for counterforce in its strategy. Allies want to know that the damage that we seek to limit to ourselves can be limited for them as well. And they want the United States to have options for nuclear response between all or nothing. Because to say that if an ally is attacked with a nuclear weapon, America is going to put 2,000 nuclear weapons onto the attacking enemy just isn't credible. They see that as they value the intermediary choices needed at the theater level of war. And for many allies, the U.S. has gone too far in reducing the role of nuclear weapons in their protection. Next slide, please. On Sentinel's cost growth, well, what can we say about Sentinel's cost growth? It's excessive and unhelpful to the circumstance at the moment, but it is what it is. But that doesn't mean it negates the strategic value of counterforce. And to simply say, well, we can't afford that. Again, imagine you're Xi Jinping looking for confirmatory proof that America is a country in decline and retreat. That's a pretty strong indicator. And on the Golden Dome project, well, we see an answer here as well. Missile defenses and counterforce are compatible, but neither can substitute for the other. Thus, we don't see the move to a much more robust homeland missile defense posture as easing the requirement for counterforce capabilities. It may, let me take that back. It may ease the requirement, but it won't eliminate it. Next slide, please. So that's the case. That's responding to the criticisms of the moment that are in renewed discourse now. But in general, from the collection of essays in the book, what's the case for counterforce that the authors make? The first is that counter to the argument of the critics that it increases the risk of war, our judgment is by and large that it reduces the risk of war. It does so by causing adversaries to worry about U.S. preemption and providing limited response options to limited attack. This gives us some possibility of eliminating nuclear damage an enemy might do. Doesn't mean we can prevent all of it, but having some capacity but the capacity we have allows us to reduce it in a meaningful way. Moreover, there's a function for ICBMs that doesn't get much attention and is often somewhat misconstrued. And this is an adversary. Let's see, if we were to do away with ICBMs, a leader contemplating a preemptive first strike onto the United States would reckon with his or her ability to eliminate a very small number of targets, and largely in military settings. So the number of people killed might be few and might be largely military. Retaining ICBMs requires that adversary leader to contemplate the only possible preemptive strike onto the United States that might succeed would be one that would require dropping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons right into the middle of the American heartland. In the first case, a president, in the case where an enemy has successfully eliminated all 5 or 6 or so strategic targets in a first preemptive strike, and then has essentially the rest of its nuclear arsenal left to expend if the US responds, the question of what the American president would do might be open in the minds of those who might attack us. But in a case in which hundreds of weapons have been dropped in the American heartland, there's no question but that the United States president would be compelled to act in response. So keeping a very high bar to preemptive strike is a virtue. Lowering it would add a good deal of nuclear risk that we don't need to accept. And a related point about flexibility, this is less directly tied to the topic of deterrence per se, but in a world in which we face multiple nuclear armed adversaries, having and especially adversaries that may coordinate their aggression in time of war, we need a robust, flexible, adaptive posture to meet these challenges. This isn't to say that some of the risks identified by the critics don't exist. There is an arms race risk. There's a question of what you make of that risk relative to other risks.